in which an affair unfolds, and we see the damage wrought upon the scorned. Chapter 30. As in all places where people gather, so in the small German watering place to which the Sherbatskys came, there occurred the usual crystallization, as it were, of society, designating for each of its members a definite and invariable place. As definitely and invariably as a particle of water acquires the specific form of a snowflake in freezing, so each new person arriving at the spa was put at once into the place appropriate for him. First, Sherbatsky samt Gemabin und Tochter, by the quarters they occupied, by name, and by the acquaintances they found, crystallized at once into their definite and allotted place. At the spa that year, there was a real German Fürsten, owing to whom the crystallization of society took place still more energetically. The princess was absolutely set on introducing her daughter to the Fürsten, and performed this ritual the very next day. Kitty made a low and graceful curtsy in her very simple, that is, very smart, summer dress ordered from Paris. The Fürsten said, "I hope the roses will soon return to this pretty little face," and at once certain paths of life were firmly established for the Sherbatskys, from which it was no longer possible to stray. The Sherbatskys became acquainted with the family of an English lady, and with a German countess and her son, wounded in the last war, and with a Swedish scholar, and with Monsieur Canute and his sister. But the main company of the Sherbatskys involuntarily constituted itself of the Moscow lady Maria Evgenyeva Rechisev, her daughter, whom Kitty found disagreeable because, like Kitty, she became ill from love, and a Moscow colonel whom Kitty had seen and known since childhood, in a uniform and epaulettes, who was extraordinarily ridiculous here, with little eyes, an open neck, and a brightly colored tie, and tedious because there was no getting rid of him. When all this became firmly established, Kitty began to be bored, the more so as the prince left for Carlsbad, and she stayed alone with her mother. She was not interested in those she knew, feeling that nothing new would come from them. Her main heartfelt interest in the spa now consisted in her observations and surmises about those she did not know. By virtue of her character, Kitty always assumed the most beautiful things about people, especially those she did not know. And now, making guesses about who was who, what relations they were in, and what sort of people they were, Kitty imagined to herself the most amazing and beautiful characters, and found confirmation in her observations. Among these people she was especially taken by a Russian girl who had come to the spa with an ailing Russian lady, Mademoiselle Stahl, as everyone called her. Mademoiselle Stahl belonged to high society, but was so ill that she was unable to walk, and only on rare good days appeared at the springs in a bath chair. But less from illness than from pride, as the princess explained, Mademoiselle Stahl was not acquainted with any of the Russians. The Russian girl looked after Mademoiselle Stahl, and besides that, as Kitty noticed, made friends with all the gravely ill, of whom there were many at the spa, and looked about and after them in the most natural way. This girl, from Kitty's observation, was not related to Mademoiselle Stahl, and at the same time was not a hired helper. Mademoiselle Stahl called her Varenka, and the others Mademoiselle Varenka. Not only was Kitty interested in observing the relations of this girl with Mademoiselle Stahl and other persons unknown to her, but, as often happens, she felt an inexplicable sympathy for this Mademoiselle Varenka, and sensed, when their eyes met, that she too was liked. This Mademoiselle Varenka was not really past her first youth, but was, as it were, a being without youth. She might have been 19. She might have been 30. If one studied her features, she was more beautiful than plain, despite her sickly complexion. She would have been of good build if it had not been for the excessive leanness of her body, and a head much too large for her medium height. But she must not have been attractive to men. She was like a beautiful flower which, while still full of petals, is scentless and no longer blooming. Besides that, she also could not be attractive to men because she lacked what Kitty had in overabundance, the restrained fire of life and an awareness of her attractiveness. She also seemed to be busy doing something that could not be doubted, and therefore it seemed that she could not be interested in anything outside it. By this contrast with herself, she especially attracted Kitty. Kitty felt that in her way of life, she would find a model for what she now sought so tormentingly: interests in life, virtues in life, outside the social relations of a girl with men, which Kitty found repulsive, picturing them now as a disgraceful exhibition of wares awaiting their buyers. The more Kitty observed her unknown friend, the more convinced she was that this girl was that same perfect being she pictured to herself, and the more she wished to make her acquaintance. The two girls met several times a day, and at each meeting Kitty's eyes said, "Who are you? What are you? Are you truly the lovely being I would allow myself to force an acquaintance? I simply admire you and love you. I love you too, and you're very, very sweet, and I would love you still more if I had time," the unknown girl's eyes answered, and indeed Kitty saw that she was always busy. She would take the children of a Russian family home from the springs, or bring the rug for an ailing woman and wrap her up, or try to divert some irritated patient, or choose and buy pastries for someone's coffee. Soon after the Sherbatskys' arrival, two more people appeared at the morning session, attracting general and unfriendly attention. These were very tall, stoop-shouldered gentlemen with enormous hands, in an old coat that was too short for him, with dark, naive, and at the same time frightening eyes, and a nice-looking, slightly pock-marked woman, very poorly and tastelessly dressed. Having recognized these people as Russians, Kitty had already begun putting together in her imagination a beautiful and moving romance about them, but the princess, learning from Kurliste that they were Nikolai Levin and Marya Nikolaevna, explained to Kitty what a bad man this Levin was, and all her dreams about these two persons vanished, not so much because of what her mother told her, as because this was Constantine's brother. These persons suddenly became highly disagreeable to her. This Levin, by his habit of twitching his head, now provoked in her an irrepressible feeling of disgust. It seemed to her that his big, frightening eyes, which followed her persistently, expressed a feeling of hatred and mockery, and she tried to avoid meeting him. If you've enjoyed this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.